In the season finale of Studio Inter, we'll be discussing the win against Empoli. We'll be reviewing the entire season with James Horncastle. We'll be discussing our thoughts on Conte moving forward, this week's Moggi, Moratti, and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on sempreinter.com. Bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I am your host, Nima Tavallaey, who is barely alive today after the mind beep that Inter put us all through last night. But we're all here, and we're going to get into all the emotions that we felt and this entire craziness of a season. But let me first introduce the panelist. He is the host of the Alex Donno Show in Florida. Welcome back, Mr. Alex Donno.
Nima, I'm so happy to be back. Everyone, it's great to be back. I'm still recovering from all of Sunday's chaos. I'm not going to lie to you. And it's not really just Sunday's chaos, the chaos of an entire season that was really an emotional roller coaster throughout. So it's bittersweet because it's, as much as I love calcio and I love watching Inter, it is a little bit of a relief for this season to be finished.
Oh, little bit. It's a big relief. I'd say it's a huge relief. And we are also joined by the Serpents of Madonnina's very own and sempreinter.com's very own Mr. Will Beckman. How are you, Will? Did you get to sleep at some point yesterday? Because when we spoke at 2-3 a.m., you were still, your pulse was just like mine. It was still racing.
Is it over? Can I come out from behind the sofa? Not really. Not really.
And we're also joined by our good friend Fulvio Santucci, who yesterday for about an hour and a half was my own Dr. Phil while he was driving from Milan. Welcome, Mr. Fulvio Santucci, to the show.
Oh, hello, guys. Am I alive? Am I alive? Can you hear me? Yeah, am I alive? And did you survive? Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? I don't know. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, and we are also joined by our very good friend, Mr. James Horncastle, who survived his trip from Italy, despite all the delays he had on his flight. Welcome back to the show, Mr. James Horncastle.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I didn't have the same cardiogram as you guys, but I was emotional all the same because I was in Rome for Daniele De Rossi's farewell game, which kind of eclipsed everything else that was going on in the league, at least for people in the Stadio Olimpico. So it's only been watching the game again this morning, which was just absolutely mind-blowing. I was texting a friend who's a big Genoa fan who was saying it was like the best thriller movie he's ever seen.
I'm surprised he says that. I'm not surprised he said that at all, because that's exactly how it was. Because when Brozovic scores the third goal, and then they go and look at the VAR and you see the replay, I'm thinking he's going to get sent off. That means that for the next 2 minutes, they're going to have a free kick and they're going to be against 10 men. I mean, who does that to their, what is wrong with Inter? Anyway, let's get into that, because this season, I mean, it started pretty well this season, and then we got to Christmas Day. And then from Christmas Day, when Raja Nainggolan presumably went on a drunken rampage on WhatsApp and threw everyone under the bus, which he apologized for later, until yesterday when Luca Banti blew the whistle for the final time in the Serie A, it's been absolute mayhem at Inter. Will and Fulvio said going into the season that they were hoping that this was going to be the season that Inter stopped being Inter. Instead, it ended up being the season where Inter out-Intered themselves. How do you look at all of this madness that's been going on for the past 6 months at Inter?
Me?
Yes.
Well, look, I mean, I was reflecting on my preseason expectations of Inter, and they were much the same as Will and Fulvio, in that I thought that they could build on last year, that it wouldn't come down to the final day, getting Champions League qualification, that if anything, they could maybe compete for second place, because I expected Napoli to regress with Pepe Reina, Jorginho, Maurizio Sarri leaving. I expected Roma to find it more difficult to get into the Champions League after losing Alisson and Strootman and Nainggolan. And instead, Napoli did better than I expected. Roma did worse, and Inter were Inter. And in some respects, it's quite disappointing. And you said they started well, Nima. No, they didn't, because if you look back at their first four fixtures, everyone thought this is great. Inter are going to get a real head of steam going. They're playing Sassuolo on the opening day. They then played Torino, Parma, and Bologna, and they only won one of those games. And all of a sudden, it felt like all the enthusiasm, all the hype around the Inter that there had been through the summer, which is always the case because Gazzetta can't help themselves from telling us that Inter are going to win the treble every year. And instead, it turned into that kind of weird season, which oddly turned in a game where they were completely outplayed against Spurs, and yet somehow managed to win that game, and would go on a 7-game winning streak in the league. When I did kind of start to believe that Inter could push for second again, because I would say that the most consistent spell that they had was that spell where they played 3 really good games of football back-to-back in the league, where they beat Milan in the derby. They outplayed Lazio 3-0 at the Olimpico. They trounced Genoa 5-0 at San Siro. And you thought, wow, this is the Inter we were expecting in Spalletti's second year. And then, as you say, you get to January, and there had already been warning signs, with Lautaro Martinez, his father, basically going on Twitter and saying, "Why isn't he picking my son?" You had Nainggolan going to the casino, showing up late. You then had the Icardi thing just blowing up. And you know what? My overall assessment is this has been an underwhelming season for Inter. They could and should have done better, particularly in the Cups in a year when Juventus went out to Atalanta in the Coppa Italia, and that was all open. In the Europa League, maybe, you remember how they went out in the Champions League, where they kind of had the match point for two of the final match days and didn't take them. But then I look at it and I think, given all of that mess that was going on, and has been probably going on for 18 months, it probably could have been a lot worse than 4th place. A lot worse, and yet they're in the Champions League. Conte has what he wants, and you can kind of use the summer to go again and be better next year. I have conflicting emotions about this season at Inter, because as we've discussed many times on Twitter and on WhatsApp, Spalletti is completely crazy, has been his own worst enemy on many occasions this season, and yet he's kind of still got them into 4th place when we've seen other clubs have crises, but maybe lesser crises than Inter, and not finish in the top 4. So I don't know I really don't know how to come on which side to come out on. I'm still going to probably come out on underwhelmed. They should have done better, but it's weird how I've seen this team play so well as they did in both derbies, really. Particularly the first half of the second derby, they were fantastic in that game. And yet, again, they're in the last 10 minutes of that game against Empoli. Everybody is, I've got quite a lot of hair at the moment, but I would be as bald as my father if I was an Inter fan.
Oh, that's brilliant. Right, I'll send you Fulvio. Do you want to ask James a question?
Okay, so I would like to understand your opinion about what can about the problem of Inter this season, because I kept saying into these months, but not only me, of course, that the players, this group of players, basically could not grow anymore, and this group of players is composed by people that by player that are not used to aim for the victory. While somebody else said that this attitude was into Spalletti, into the coach. So I would like to understand your opinion about this. So do you think that the problem of this madness that happened to Inter into the last months is about the players, is about the coach? And in any case, what do you think can change with Conte on charge now?
So I think, reflecting on Spalletti's 2 years as Inter coach, one of the things that has surprised me and disappointed me the most is the lack of inventiveness in his coaching, because I think that is something that has always distinguished him, particularly in both spells at Roma. And instead, this time, Inter always felt a bit one-dimensional, a bit flat. And there would be the odd substitution, the odd move in one or two games, which would surprise you and think, okay, Spalletti is able to change games, he's able to outthink his opponent. But that surprised me, that he wasn't able to have as much of an influence as I think he has had on other teams in his career. The other thing, I mean, if you look at the numbers that have come through over the last over the last 24 hours, kind of reviewing the season, Inter are the team that average the most possession per game in Serie A. They are the team that have kept the most clean sheets in Serie A. And yet you look at them and you think, okay, maybe they've dominated the ball, but have they dominated as many games as those numbers suggest? Have they always been in control of those games as those numbers would suggest? No, I don't think they have. And I think that's why we come back to this Inter DNA, this sense that this team, this club has always got this strain of this culture within it. I think it comes from a team that has been. I look at some of the new signings from last summer, and I don't think they have all assimilated as well as many people have expected. You look at Simo Bisalico, the fullback, that hasn't worked out. You look at Dalbert before that. Spalletti's tried to make that work. It hasn't really. You then look at Nainggolan. Now, Nainggolan has had big moments, most notably last night, essentially in getting the goal that clinched them Champions League qualification. He scored a great goal against Juventus. He did well particularly in a 4-game kind of stretch in February, but has he done as much as we expected him to do? I think in some respects the goal he scored last night kind of repaid a bit of a debt to Spalletti, because I think he's been a bit of a disappointment. And other than that, I think De Vrij and Asamoah. I mean, Asamoah's been okay. De Vrij has been pretty much as you would expect. I just feel that this team doesn't have a chemistry about it. I think it needs for these players to improve as well. We can talk about the coach making a difference, but I do think sometimes it comes from within, with players taking responsibility for themselves and getting on together and finding solutions themselves. And I don't think Inter always there's enough joined up thinking with Inter as teammates to make that happen. So I think that's going to be the fundamental change that we'll see this summer. Is some of those characters will leave. It can't have been easy being around with Mario Icardi and everything going around over the last 6 months. It can't have been easy being, with Ivan Perisic. And that again, it comes back to this point that in some respects it could have been so much worse than 4th place, given how bad the atmosphere was around this team. All the things that kind of could inhibit this team and stop it from getting results. So I expect Perisic will go. I expect Icardi will go. I expect some of the kind of guys who, again, Suning blew a lot of money on early on in their ownership, like João Mario, who, to be fair to him, at the end of December, beginning of January, did pretty well, and then again, I think Conte, and you the profile that Conte is Diego Godin. You look at Edin Dzeko, who was whistled as he came off last night at the Stadio Olimpico. It looks like that's going to happen. These are guys who are old, but know what it takes to get it done, have won titles before, and I think that ultimately is the profile of player that they're going for.
Will?
Yeah, I don't have a question as such. I have a statement. I wanted to know if James agreed. By the way, I thought of this earlier when Nima was ranting at me on the phone. It sort of came into my head. Last season, Inter reached the Champions League because of Mauro Icardi. This season, they reached the Champions League in spite of Mauro Icardi.
I agree with that completely, because I was looking at the last time he scored a goal from open play, and I'm going to be uncharitable and say it was at the end of October against Lazio. You can say he scored one against Roma at the end of December, but really it was from a set piece. It was heading in a corner. The rest have been penalties. He only scored 6 goals from open play. So even when he's been on the pitch, even when he's come back from the impossible, the brink, really, the relationship that could not be reconciled, with him on the pitch, he's missed penalties, he's missed chances, and again, the second half of the season, they have suffered so badly because if you look at where their second half of the season, where they would play, they'd be 8th on the basis of the 19.
Behind Bologna. I was just looking at that.
19 games since January, they'd be 8th. Their attack is 12th in that time. They'd only scored 26 goals in those 19 games. And ultimately it has come down to Handanovic, it's come down to the defence, and it's come down to the odd player coming good for 3 or 4 games and then burning out for a time. I mean, you look at when initially Icardi decided that he wasn't going to show up, he wasn't going to be part of the squad during his standoff with the club, and how Lautaro initially came very good, particularly with that performance in the derby where he was magnificent. They've had players who've come up with enough moments like that, as you would expect a team that has invested this much money in the squad, that has, to be honest, let's be honest, a lot of talent around it. They've just been able to do it. And I mean, to go back to what Fulvio was, the question Fulvio asked about what's kind of happened at Inter over the last couple of years and this team and its structure. I remember the last 6 months of last season, what kind of helped Inter get over the line was not only Icardi, it was that they found a fluency with Cancelo and Rafinha. And
I agree with that.
You have FFP, they can't buy Cancelo. Cancelo goes to Juventus. They decide not to go for Rafinha. They sign Nainggolan instead. And it's almost like they're starting again.
Yeah.
And I think that has been another factor in Inter's season being not as good as expected.
Good point. Alex, you have a question for James?
Yeah, I have a question that's more of a big picture, James, in Serie A this season. I've lost count of how many VAR controversies there have been. There was a bit of controversy in the match Sunday, and a penalty that was given to Empoli that Icardi missed. And, of course, you go back to the Fiorentina match in February, the Danilo D'Ambrosio handball. VAR this season seemed to take a step back from a year ago. What sort of tweaks do you think need to be made to the way it's implemented?
Get rid of it.
Change the refs.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting seeing what the Premier League. One of the recommendations they're bringing in is to just bring in the best referees, regardless of where they're from. The elite foreign referees, as you see in the Champions League, which, to be honest, hasn't stopped these controversies from happening in the Champions League. I think one of the issues with with VAR is that I think it's exposed how vague some of the rules are, particularly when it comes to handball. Handball above all, where you now have this crazy situation in Serie A where it doesn't matter whether it's deliberate or not, whether there's intention. If someone handles the ball in the penalty area, just give it. and we've seen some kind of ludicrous penalties given because of that. I seem to remember one, dare I say, even given against Juventus in the Juventus-Sampdoria game. I think there were a couple of penalties in December in that game, which both Allegri and Gianpaolo weren't happy about because it was just a ridiculous interpretation of the rules. So I think IFAB has to go back and redraft these rules. So there is better clarity for referees when it comes to implementing it. So yeah, I mean, it's still not a particularly satisfactory situation.
But I mean, if you really look back to Fiorentina Inter, where the ball didn't even hit D'Ambrosio's arm, and he looks at the video and he still gives a penalty. I mean, that to me is more an issue of that's not a rule problem for me. It's more a referee under a lot of pressure to be nice. If you don't want to be flog conspiracy theories, you have to say that a referee in the 93rd minute in a game like that maybe the referees shouldn't look at it. Maybe they should have like a war room like they have in the NHL where they have like referees out sitting comfortably out far away from the stadium looking at these things and then deciding whether or not similar to what they do in ice hockey pretty much. What do you think about that?
Well, I think just from my experience of going to games this year, one of the really weird things about a referee going to review is you see the referee go over and then the players follow him, and you don't really see it on TV, but they all kind of follow him, and then they just stand behind him like a kind of mob. They're all shouting various things at him, which it remains, I think, even when you give someone all the tools, I think Nima was alluding to this, you give them all the tools to make the best decision, the right decision, human error is still a factor. For whatever reason, someone's concentration can be distracted for a fraction of a second, and they will still make the wrong decision having seen the video evidence. I think it's something that's unfortunately it's always going to be there, and I think there was this expectation. It wasn't packaged as well as it should have been, where people thought it would end mistakes. And the fact is, this machinery is still being used, applied, interpreted by human beings. So just as pundits, when they watch a replay back 45 minutes after a game is finished and they still misinterpret it or get it wrong, I think referees in the blink of an eye can still get it wrong as well, and I think that's just something we're going to have to live with.
That's a good point. I wanted to just before we let you go, will we be enjoying your walks down memory lane, down Serie A memory lane next season when you make these? When you talk about classic calcio legends during halftime of games, will we be enjoying that next season?
I have no idea. I have no idea that these things actually go out because I don't watch the world feed, and obviously they don't use them in Italy. So I occasionally get people tweeting from some bar in Nepal saying that they've seen ugly talking about Kaká or something, but I imagine so. I mean, there are enough legends to go around, so we'll see. And I'm cheap enough that they use me for them. So there you go.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think this is the second or third time you came on this season, James. Just this season, James. We really appreciate it. What's happening for you now? Are you going to have a nice long vacation, or what can we look forward to?
It's quite a tournament this summer, but there are lots of mini major tournaments, if that makes sense. I mean, I might be going to watch Italy play Bosnia, and at the moment, I'm kind of just following the under 20 World Cup as that's going on, because I quite enjoyed the under 17s last week. Which, again, should be something you guys should be excited about, because probably the best Italy player and one of the best players in the tournament does Inter in Sebastiano Esposito. So I think it will just be that. Going to Sicily in August, what can I say? It's
it's a hard life.
Yeah.
Well,
and watching Bonanno Di Marzio as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and often WhatsApping. One of my favorite pastimes about watching Serie A is either WhatsApping Will during Calciomercato, or I usually hear from Will whenever Giancarlo Marocchi is commentating, or on Sky Calcio.
He'll be on the telly from Milano Marittima this summer, talking about absolute nonsense as always in his shorts. Yeah.
As long as he's with
I'm really looking forward to the jingle that Alessandro Bonan writes for the Calciomercato one, because me and Will were talking about it earlier, and I don't think that he's ever written a good one as good as the one where it's basically a child singing "Darmi un bacio così ti da Rivera." I absolutely love that jingle. Thank you so much, James, for coming on at James Horncastle. Thank you again, and we'll hope to have you on next season.
Pleasure, guys. The thing is, you'll have so much to already be, get this season for, because I expect Conte will be announced this week. You'll already be going into transfer overload. It'll be like what happened on Sunday never happened. So.
Yeah, it'll be maybe a little bit more of a controlled chaos as opposed to this uncontrolled mayhem. Thanks, James. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure, guys.
Ciao.
Bye, James.
Right. Before we let's talk about this season, because I don't know what to make of it, and I'm trying to collect my thoughts. But going into this season, in the first episode, I was listening to the first episode, the season premiere we did going into this season. And I remember I said that I wanted for Inter to have a good season. I wanted to see improvement in the Serie A. We did not see that. Inter have fewer goals, Inter have fewer points, have won fewer matches, and finish fourth again. And then I wanted Inter to get to the semi-final or final of the Coppa Italia. Well, that didn't happen. Then you have qualify from the group stage, or at least get to the quarterfinal of the Europa League. That didn't happen. So it's definitely a season where it was I wouldn't say it was a step back, but it's a step sideways. And I think that is maybe that, as James said, there's the other side of it is, well, throughout this entire chaos, Inter still managed to qualify for the Champions League, which is a huge accomplishment. But so I'm curious to hear, where are you, Fulvio, on this? Have you had time yet to think about where you are on this season? Fulvio? You there?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I lost you for some time. Actually not. I did not, or at least I did. I made a short review in my mind about what the season was during the last game. But actually, what I witnessed yesterday was really over my imagination of the final of the season. But it's really beyond my imagination, to be honest. But what I can tell is that this season everybody expected Inter to make a step ahead, right? To consolidate his growth, because the Spalletti project seemed very, very good last year. And everybody talked about Inter struggle last year, but they were short. They They played all the first part of the season with just 3 full backs in the squad. So the roster was practically short, very short. So the common opinion was Spalletti did not have the resources to do better, right? And when the summer mercato closed, a lot of supporters thought about this was a good session, very with players very useful, with very good deals, in a like free transfer of a very good player like De Vrij, like Asamoah. So yes, everybody expected actually a step ahead, and I don't know. Somebody have predicted to witness the same old story, right? To go with the first part played very good, and after Christmas, complete madness. But I think that once again, I was telling this to James earlier, that it depends by the players, right? Because you have practically the same struggles of the last 3-4 years, and but you change the managers. You have the same struggle with Mancini. You have the struggle with Pioli. You have the struggle with Spalletti. So that means that it's not a matter of managers, but probably a matter of players. Since if you can have something in common between the 3 Inter, the 3 or 4 last season of Inter are the players, right? I mean how can I tell the players that practically are in charge of the dressing room, and I'm thinking about Icardi, I'm thinking about Perisic. Probably I would before yesterday game I would tell you Handanovic as well, but Handanovic after yesterday it's really untouchable. I think well deserved. But once again, the point is that I think that when you have the same struggle, when you continue to do the same thing, despite having so different project, because if you remember, with Mancini, Inter was about physics, was about athleticism, was about being huger than the other one, right? When Inter with Spalletti was completely the opposite, right? We try to play a good football. We try to keep the ball. We try to keep the game on. So 2 different approach, 2 different styles, but once again the same results. So I think that the problem are the players, and I can tell you that because this season was a disaster, a complete failure for on the knockout game, right? I'm thinking about the PSV Eindhoven. I'm thinking about Lazio in Coppa Italia. I'm thinking about Eintracht, even though Eintracht was a weird game because you were really short on players, but also last night was a knockout game if you think about it, and you take the same risk. So that means that you have a mental issues right into the
it's a mentality. I mean, we've said about, I don't know how many times we've spoken about it just on this show, the fact that this group of players is mentally weak, and there's something that you told me yesterday when we were speaking, that I hadn't really thought about it that much, but yesterday when I was watching this game, I was replaying that in my mind, and that's the fact that buying players and building a squad is not just about buying players who are good and score goals and have assists and have good stats. It also comes down to the personality and the mental strength. And this group of players has been built.
It's a matter of choices as well, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
If you think what you witnessed yesterday, you think like a player like Keita Balde, which is actually a good player. I mean, I like him on the field, but. When you do something like Keita Balde do on the stoppage time when Brozovic scored, he make a completely pointless foul,
No need.
And it was already booked, right? So it's stupid. It's definitely idiot to do something like that. So in Inter, and Keita is new, right? He's a new player, so that's show me that Inter keep buying players that are not able to make smart choices into the game, right?
Exactly, and that falls flatly in the lap of Mr. Piero Ausilio.
Of course, especially in Italian culture, it's really common to blame just one person. But this is a complex problem, and the complex problem does not have a simple solution, right? So it's not that you need to find a scapegoat, but of course, Ausilio is one of the other points in common with the other Inter that he provided, right? Because all these players, and if you think about Keita Balde and what he did, right? But also, I mean, like Kondogbia. You remember Kondogbia?
Yeah.
Was exactly this kind of players, right? And it was impossible for him to make smart choices into the game, to handle the game, to properly cope with the different stages of the game, and we keep as Inter, we keep signing this kind of players that are not able to do something like that, are not able to make the to have the smart choices into the game, but also to handle the pressure. And I don't know, it's something that's something for which the Direttore Sportivo Piero Ausilio is surely responsible, or at least accountable for that. Even though nobody ever questioned about him about this. But yes, I think that's his main responsibility was to have the I mean, he was in charge of the squad until Marotta arrives. I mean, for a little bit of time it was Sabatini with him, but he was in charge of the team. And when he was in charge of the team, he practically made some choices, like Icardi captain that was completely destroyed. They completely destroyed the dressing room. So he's accountable for that, of course. But for some reason, nobody ever questioned on him about this. And we talk about that a lot of times, right? Even at the beginning of the season, right? But yes, I think he's accountable, but I think he's gonna get away with murder once again.
Right. Will, well, have you had any chance to think about the season? I'm keen to hear, like, I mean, where are you on this? I mean, it's been a. Are you also the kind of side? Are you leaning a little bit towards where I am, the kind of sidestep? You know, it's been a step sideways, or are you more into what James said, maybe that this is a disappointment despite everything?
Well, a sidestep is in itself a backward step, really, because this was a season where you were supposed to become better and you didn't. So if you become the same, you've had a bad season. There's a remarkable freeze frame going around on Twitter today about the exact moment at which Matthias Vecino scored against Lazio last season and the moment at which Raja Nangolan scored yesterday. The stopwatch. It says 80 minutes and 47 seconds. Now, that just says everything. You know, twice in a row, Inter have had to wait until the last 10 minutes of the last game of the season to score the goal that would qualify them for the Champions League. And I think that it's a very eloquent description of what's happened. I think it's just, it is a disappointing season. I mean, it's not a failure because ultimately the only crucial, indispensable objective was met. You know, you didn't drop out of the top four. So that's, you know, it's not a disaster, but we didn't do anything more than what we had to do. So in that sense, I think it has to be a disappointment, particularly given what this team showed between September and November, which was really the moment where we got much like last season, those were the points that got us into the Champions League in the end. So no, it's been a really poor season in the Cup. I think of all the things that have happened this season, the Coppa Italia defeat remains completely unforgivable, given that the team that we lost to went on to win the tournament, and we haven't won a tournament for 8 years now. So that was really, really difficult to accept. But you know, it is a disappointment. I didn't think Inter were going to be challenging Juventus, and I didn't think they were necessarily going to finish second, like everybody said at the start of the season. You know, James is right. Gazzetta do always love to talk up Inter at the start of the season. But I did think that we could be a comfortable third, and we were a comfortable third at the turn of the year. You know, when we played Empoli at the end of the first half of the season, we were 8 points clear of fifth place. Then between January and May, for one reason or another, we picked up 30 points from 19 games, scored less goals than we had in the first half of the season, and we ended up once again in the same position, and it was a completely different feeling to last season. That match against Lazio was something to be celebrated, because it was so long since we've been in the Champions League. It was a slightly weaker squad, a slightly shorter squad. This season there was nothing to celebrate last night. This was we saved a humiliation. We avoided a humiliation. We dodged a bullet. However you want to say it. I mean, as nice as it is to deny Milan on the last day of the season at Champions League, they were inside for 40 minutes. That's not really the point. It was a terrible way to end the season. And I just think that the results that we've seen over the last 3 years, they're not going to change unless the players change. Conte, I do have faith in Conte, because he is brilliant at winning.
Don't go into that, because we're going to discuss that briefly.
No, but this is relevant, because these players have got to change, and I just don't know if they can. This is the third time in 4 years, as Fulvio showed a couple of weeks ago with a few graphs he put up, that the team has sprinted in the first half of the season and then crawled over the line in the second half of the season. It happens every single year. Yeah. It's extraordinary, and so to come full circle, a sideward step is a backward step.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. But if I'm allowed to play devil's advocate, and I got to say, I kind of feel disgusted even saying this to you, Alex. Isn't it a sign of strength, though, somehow, that when you go through all this, that when it really matters, when your back is really against the wall, that the Inter 2 years in a row now have built maybe a culture of Shut up, Will.
This is so no, listeners need to know, right? This is so different to what he was saying a few hours ago.
No,
right?
because what I want to, I will say what I think. I'm trying to be a neutral host here, all right? No, but seriously, is it a sign of strength after all, Alex, that this, for the second year in a row, in the last game when it matters the most, Inter managed to get the job done?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I slept very well Sunday night. I'm sure I'll sleep very well again on Monday night. Nima, my overall view of this season, it was purgatory, right? I mean, it was hopefully a bridge to better times to come. Hopefully, I have to use the word hopefully, because with Inter, you never know that they can find ways to ruin what looks to be, promising changes. So you take it with a grain of salt. Sure, I am definitely going to remember the 2018-29 campaign, I think, a lot more for off the pitch stuff than on the pitch stuff. I mean, on the pitch, sure, you'll remember the derby victories, the home victory against Napoli on Boxing Day, or the 3-0 against Lazio early in the season. There were certainly a few decent moments on the pitch, but off the pitch in the negative column, you'll remember Icardi and Wanda and all the drama. But I think for me, honestly, there is enough positive that I feel good about Inter right now. When you think about exiting the financial fair play settlement, bringing in Marotta, which I think was the signing of the season for Inter. I know we're going to debate, Conte in a few minutes, but certainly I see Suning making an investment, a big monetary investment in a coach that they believe will take them to the next level. So I see hopefully enough positive things, enough positive seeds being planted. And of course, the relief of that comes with Champions League qualification, because Conte would come regardless. But without Champions League qualification, who knows how that would have affected the summer mercato. I'm sure there would have been, differences in the money to spend and all that. Plus, you get to enjoy Champions League games next season. So for as difficult of a roller coaster as it may have been, and overall my negatives, my memories on the pitch will be negative from this campaign. I think overall there is a theme of positivity, especially having the financial fair play stuff behind you. Right now, I feel good. I actually feel happy today, and I feel very happy that this season is now over.
Oh yeah, that I can definitely. I'm most happy about that, to be honest. That this incredible crap storm of a season is over. To be perfectly honest, I'm really happy about that. But to be honest, my feeling is that this has been okay, Inter started the season pretty poorly, but when you go on a 7-win, seven match winning streak, that kind of that puts everything in order again. And then I started to think that okay, Inter struggled in the beginning, but now they're gonna, now they're on form. And then then the match against Napoli, that was so important that Inter unexpectedly won, because I thought that was a very well balanced game. Despite all the disgusting off-field or behavior in the stands, then since then it's just been complete circus show from everyone. I mean, James was very diplomatic when he said it couldn't have been easy to have to share a dressing room with Ivan Perisic and Mauro Icardi. That's putting it mildly. It must have been hell. I mean, think about someone like Milan Skriniar and poor De Vrij, his first season. He must have think, what kind of a circus freak show have I walked into here? I mean, it just, you have a dressing room where the captain's wife goes on TV every week and criticizes her husband/agent's teammates, and he says his defense is, I didn't say it, she did. And is like a 5-year-old, and is completely unable to understand the chain of consequences that it's still someone representing you, just like she is completely incapable of intellectually comprehending that when she, as his agent, says these things, it reflects poorly on him, and instead she plays this kind of, she plays the martyr of Jesus dying on the cross for the sins of humanity, pretty much, and it just goes on from there. And to me, this has been, and then you have Spalletti, who clearly is insane and crazy, that does all the stuff he does. But at the end of the day, I actually wanted to give a little bit of credit to Spalletti, because he came to Inter with one clear objective, and that was to stabilize Inter as a team that qualifies for the Champions League. And despite everything, he did that. And that, I think, should be acknowledged. But the rest of them, absolutely, I agree. So many of these players have to leave. Dalbert, the guy has the mental strength of eggshells or tissue paper. I mean, yesterday he walked on there and he was shell shocked. He was scared of his own shadow. How D'Ambrosio managed to get that ball onto the crossbar and then went absolutely ballistic, shouting at Dalbert. I mean, these players have to leave. They are just not mentally strong enough to be at Inter. And for me, the mercato that we're going into right now, the most important aspect of that is being able to get paid for these players. That's where I want to see if Vasilio and Marotta can really earn their wage. Can they get paid for Dalbert? Can they get paid for what's his name? Can they get paid for Perisic? Should Politano stay? Can they redeem him and then sell him on for a profit? All of these players that have been very, very unstable, so to speak, mentally. These have to go. And if you're bringing, especially if you bring in Antonio Conte, who is a coach who is so much, you have to be so mentally strong to deal with Antonio Conte. This is a guy who, I remember him at Juventus when he ripped into Milos Krasic on the sidelines in front of the whole world and the whole stadium for nothing. It's not Spalletti. Spalletti doesn't do that on the sidelines. He just yells and screams, but he doesn't put you through the ringer like that, like as an individual. Conte will do that if he's not happy. He's not, he doesn't take any prisoners. And if you're going to do that with this group of players, that's going to end in complete chaos. But if they do give him the mercato that he wants, if they bring in the players, the characters that he wants, my only concern, and this is what I spoke to Fulvio about yesterday when we were speaking on the phone, is that my biggest concern is Milan Skriniar, and that is that I don't see Milan Skriniar working well in a defensive, in a three-man defense. Other than that, I don't have any concerns, maybe, except for maybe his volatile personality. But then again, Marotta's used to that, so I hope that he should be able to handle that. What do you think, Will? I mean, what's your overall feeling about Conte now that he's, by all accounts, he's definitely coming?
Well, I think one thing that Conte has shown in his, both at Chelsea, at Juventus, and kind of as in charge of Italy is that he's one of the best coaches in the world at succeeding in his first season in charge of clubs. And I think that speaks to his ability to almost rebuild. Take a team that's kind of down in the dumps, stuff it full of motivation, grinta, and passion, and take it back to its former glories. That's not quite the task he has here at Inter, because while we have all these problems that we've just discussed, we have qualified for the Champions League 2 years in a row. There's already a project kind of on its feet here. So he's got a bit of a head start compared to where he was maybe with Juventus and to an extent with Chelsea. Having said that, I think he's one of the best coaches around at the moment. If you look at the alternatives, there weren't that many, and I as someone who follows Chelsea, I was not particularly surprised when he took Chelsea to the title, because that's the kind of thing he does. He's good at getting kind of rubbish players to overperform. So I'm not against it. I think he's probably he's better equipped to challenge Juventus than Spalletti would have done. I think it's not impossible that we could start getting a little bit close to Juventus with Conte. I think with Spalletti that would always have been difficult, just because of a pedigree and experience almost. But there is a big question mark over, I think, the fans, and I don't say this as an accusatory thing. I think the Inter fans are going to be split right down the middle with Conte, and I wonder what that's going to do to the atmosphere around the club, because there will be some, even if Inter were to be top at Christmas, who would not feel right about being top with Antonio Conte, and I hope that doesn't kind of influence the passion and the attendance figures at San Siro, because that's always been this club's strongest force. But as I said, as I was hinting at earlier, I think there's only so much Conte can do with this group of players. I know that he is good at getting players to overperform, but this group of players just seems chronically addicted to, just chronically weak mentally. And if they've done this, if they had the same season, since 2015-16, 3 times out of 4, or even 4 times out of 4, this is possibly just going to be the same, and I'm worried that we will now spend the next 2 months hearing about how Conte will revitalize Vecino, how he will revitalize D'Ambrosio, how Perisic will be back to his best under Conte. You've got to stop indulging this squad of players, and I don't know if that's going to be, I don't know if Inter are going to hide behind Conte as an excuse to keep this squad, because I think if that doesn't happen, then we could well be in for another sort of very expensive disappointment. So I don't know. In theory, I'm not against it, but I don't think Conte on his own is enough to solve Inter's problems.
Fulvio, what are your thoughts on Conte taking over at Inter? I mean, you live in Italy, you're from Milan, the area. How do you think this will affect Inter, as Will was alluding to?
Well, it's actually difficult to predict, because I start probably it's better first start to saying that I agree with this choice. I agree just because I see in Antonio Conte an upgrade. If we put that in comparison with Spalletti, and for a team that's wanna grow up, because I think that's the assumption. Spalletti is not enough. Or at least Spalletti is okay to rebuild, was okay to rebuild the team, and he made a good job at the end of the day. But it's not able to, or at least it's not the right profile to try win something, right? To try to lift some trophies, let's say. So I start to say that I agree with this, but will at a point, right? Because if the hiring of Conte is how can I say, the short road to go into the current squad and say, okay, this is the squad, but with Conte, you will see that will be different. I'm not okay with that, definitely, right? Especially with players like, especially with that 2 players, Icardi and Perisic, that, in my opinion, needs to leave as soon as possible, right? So. Actually, it's something that I wouldn't understand, right? If if Inter hiring Conte and avoid to make some signing real how can I say game changer, right? At least a couple of game changer, and we all know what are the zone of the field that needs to be rebuilt practically. But I don't know if what will be the attitude of Conte, because I remember that when Conte first arrived at Juventus, but Juventus came from a 7th spot in Serie A, so a completely different situation, right? It was a team to be rebuilt practically from square one. But actually, on the first season of Juventus, Juventus buy a lot of players, right? So they bought Matri, they bought Vucinic, Vidal, Quagliarella, Lichtsteiner, Pepe, Giaccherini. So I mean, not very big names, but at the end of the day are names that was useful for the Conte style of play. But we witnessed that later. So what I think is that if you are Conte, you need to understand that Conte needs some kind of players that have some attitude, and of course, Inter players now don't have this attitude. I think that's we all witnessed yesterday why, right? It's a team that it's terrified about the victory, and it's the same. It's exactly opposite of Conte at the moment. So that's one of the thing that Conte can bring. But the other thing is that it will be the fan base will be very divided, will be controversial, right? Because I think that this hiring of Conte means that there's a completely different path that Inter will take from now on, or probably already start to take. And it practically jeopardizes all the how can I say, all the bricks of what we call Interismo. So that means practically the principle of being an Inter supporters. So like what Moratti built, what Massimo Moratti built in his 20 years and 20 years of being president. And the poisoned rivalry with Juventus made have a role here, because Conte was the captain of this Juventus that practically started this poisoned rivalry with Inter. But you know what? At the end of the day, I think it's a matter of result, right? So I'm talking with people, and a lot of people are saying to me, "Okay, I stop here." And I will probably follow some games, but my affection won't be the same. But it's easy to say it now. I want to understand what happened if Conte achieves some results, right? Because typically when you achieve some results, everybody tends to forget everything about the past, about the values of all of this, about the principles. So it's difficult to understand how Conte will affect Inter in this way. But what can we say? For me, for sure, I'm pretty convinced about this, is that we are witnessing a change of era into Inter, and the hiring Marotta and hiring Conte is more than a hint in this direction.
That's a really interesting point. Where are you, Alex, on the Conte debate, on the Conte scale?
Well, I'm very happy for Antonio Conte, because moving to Milano, he won't have to travel very far to buy his next couch. The trip he made from London to Milan back in January, the frequent flyer miles are no longer necessary. Admittedly, when I first, around that time, January, might even have been late in the fall, when we first saw Conte's name linked to Inter, my initial reactions were, no, not him, not that guy. I don't want the Juve DNA creeping farther and farther into Inter. Slowly, though, I conditioned myself to the idea that Fulvio mentioned that this is a results-oriented business, and I just want to see this team win trophies again. And I do honestly believe, with those available, especially with the rapport and the relationship that he has with Marotta, I think they're making the right choice. Let's not discount how important it is for Beppe Marotta to be able to make his own hire and put his fingerprints on this. It was very obvious in recent months, the friction that he had with Spalletti essentially calling him out, usually not by name, but maybe sometimes by name in some of the post-match comments he made. It was toxic, right? And not that Antonio Conte bleeds sanity. Like, you don't usually think, oh, this is a guy that's going to bring harmony to your organization. But I do think that, with he and Marotta being on the same page, and with this being a Marotta move right there, I think it puts Inter in a better position with the CEO and the coach being on the same page. So in that regard, he's certainly an upgrade over Spalletti. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And I alluded to this earlier. I think that this is a big statement by Suning, and it's welcome to see the sort of investment they were able to make, both from a symbolic standpoint to go after, one of the most sought after available coaches. And, I don't know if the reports are true that he's really going to be making 12 million per season. I hope it's a little bit less than that, because I don't know how the bidding could get that high, but it certainly shows a symbolic and financial investment that this ownership group is making. And now that the financial fair play restrictions are behind them, hopefully this is a sign of things to come in the transfer window. So I think it's overall a positive move, and I look forward to seeing him introduced probably this week.
That's a great
I think
point.
I think it's a really important point about Marotta, and I forgot to mention that. If you're going to take Marotta, you have to let him be Marotta at 360 degrees. It's no point just having him there and not giving him the keys to the car as it is. He's got to be able to, if he's going to, he's got to be able to make his, like you said, stamp his mark on his. This is his sporting project. He can't build his vision if he can't choose the coach. It would just undermine him completely. And at that point, you would have to ask, well, why have we got him? You've got to let Marotta be Marotta completely. So, keeping Spalletti from that sense wouldn't have had much sense. One thing that Alex mentioned there as well is the money. Now, this is costing Inter a lot of money, and that shouldn't be forgotten either. Because if we're all saying that we hope that this doesn't encourage the club to maybe not revamp the squad in the way we want, this is going to slash the budget for this summer. We don't know the exact numbers, but it's going to cost a lot of money to pay Spalletti out for the 2 years of his contract that was left, and it's going to cost Conte. So it's going to cost Inter a lot of money to employ Conte for 3 years with that kind of salary. So we don't know exactly how much money is going to be available. We never quite know unless you're inside. But even with financial fair play maybe stepping out of the way, I wonder how much that will impact on the business that Inter are going to do over the summer. I hope it's not significant damage that it causes, because this is an operation that cannot be delayed any longer. The revamping of the squad.
Agreed. Now it's time for the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something in the world of football pretty heavily. Starting with this week's Moggi, this week's frog, actually, which will start with Mr. Alex Donno.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
A little unconventional maybe, but for this week's frog, I have to give a shout out to the absolute shitstorm on Calcio Twitter during the late matches on Sunday. I mean, boy, was it fun, having the Inter, Atalanta, Milan matches happening simultaneously, having in 1 second you had Inter in third, now Atalanta's in fourth, Milan in fifth, and Milan's in third, and Inter's in Europa League. To see it go back and forth, and as Will mentioned in our group chat, the delightful amount of drafts of Milan Twitter that they must have had ready to celebrate Inter's demise into Europa League. I would love to see some of those tweets come to the surface. And guys, most of all, really, I think the frog should go to so many of you out there on Inter Twitter who have just ripped the piss out of for years. Danilo D'Ambrosio now having to admit this guy essentially single-handedly gifted Inter 4 points this season in stopping that Milan shot with his nuts, and then doing what he did on Sunday with that goal line clearance to the crossbar. The amount of apologies that man has seen on social media, and also Samir Handanovic, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, so controversial how sometimes he stands and just watches shots and does nothing. Criticized for winning goalkeeper of the year, which was a little curious to me, but boy, did he go out there on Sunday and earn that award probably in that one match. And so just the amount of Twitter apologies D'Ambrosio, Handanovic had, and just the amount of nonsense that was spewed during Sunday's matches. I don't know how we watched football before football Twitter, but guys, it was delightful.
I was one of them. I was one of them about Handanovic.
Yeah, but I mean, I was one of them about D'Ambrosio. I can admit that I was one of the D'Ambrosio people.
Me too. Me too.
If he tried to do that clearance another 1,000 times, it would never hit the bar and bounce out.
But, you know, we say the same thing
last night.
We say the same thing after the clearance of the derby, the last minute clearance, right? And actually, he achieved that again. So probably it's not a coincidence.
But Handanovic, we have to say, you and I were talking about it earlier, Fulvio, that must have been the best performance that Handanovic has given in his career. I mean, the saves he did, I was watching them again. Wow.
In such an important match, I think it is. I can remember actually a game that Handanovic played on this level. It was against Atalanta, 15-16 season, the first season of Mancini. And it was
when he had the cap on in the sun.
Yeah, exactly, that one. And he made an incredible match. He made an incredible game, but it was not so important, right? So it makes some difference when you have this important game, and when you have your teammates that practically are not into the game with their mind anymore, and you are able to achieve this kind of performance. That is something, guys.
Agreed. Right, let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Fulvio Santucci.
There is this sick attitude in Italy to think about what happened behind the scenes of the last game of Serie A, right? In Italy, we are used to call that biscotto, which literally means cookie, but basically it refers to an adjusted game, right? And it's typical in the Serie A games to think, in the last Serie A games to think about that. But it's typically when you have teams that have not any ambition of standing normally. But this story is different. So Gianluigi Buffon once said that it's better to have 200 persons than a single casualty. And this is history practically. But that sounds exactly like what happened last night in Fiorentina-Genoa on the Florence match. So let me give you some background. Both teams were involved in the relegation group, as Fiorentina needed 1 point to survive, while Genoa needed 1 point more than Empoli to keep the Serie A party on. So when this background was clear, immediately everyone started into each other like, how does it sound, an adjusted draw? I mean, at the end of the day, these two teams were amongst the ones who achieved less games won in the second part of the season, so why not, right? And now you can tell me, okay, Fulvio, but you think you're too suspicious. I mean, two teams in relegation zone are supposed to fight for the life.
I love this, Fulvio. Go. I'm loving this. You know I love this. Yes, go. Give me more. Yeah, come on.
I mean, two teams in relegation zone normally are supposed to fight for their life, right? You see that in all the leagues of the world. You see that in England. You see that in Germany. You see that in Spain, also in Spain. But typically, when two teams are involved into the relegation zone and they have a clash against each other into the last game of the season, it is a clash, right? It's assumed that it is a clash. Well, surprise, it was a draw 0-0. 9 shots on aggregate, guys. 9 shots on aggregate, and I don't mean shots on goal, but I mean aggregate shots. 9 shots on aggregate. A combined expected goals rate of 0.42, which is practically the rate of Skriniar or Gagliardini or something like that. With both things, we're very happy to finish the season like that. I mean, they were happy to finish the season like that. But you know what the funny part is that these two teams clearly avoid to go into the clash because Genoa relied to Inter victory, which was actually not the best idea ever, as we all witnessed, right? But anyway, they really go through this way, and they literally stopped playing with the plan to avoid playing until some surprise came from San Siro. this is really unfair. Let's face it, guys. This is really unfair because honestly, Empoli, we witnessed yesterday, deserves to stay up much more than the two other teams, Fiorentina and Genoa. But it is what it is. There's no mercy for that. So Empoli went down. Fiorentina, Genoa will stay up with this alleged, and I mean that in bracket, alleged adjusted game. But at least we can literally, and I mean literally, nominate both as our Moggi of the week.
I absolutely love these biscotti rumors and ideas. You know I do, Fulvio. I love this. Oh, I'm like a kid on Christmas. Thank you for that. I love Italian paranoia. I absolutely love it. Right, let's move on to the Moratti of the week, which will be presented by Mr. Will Beckman.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Yes, this week's Moratti, I think, can only be us, poor Inter fans, because you know,
we're alive.
Happens, yeah, we're alive. Whatever happens, we are stupid. We are stupidly in love, and we keep going to the stadium. We keep going to San Siro to watch our hearts being twisted, ripped out, put back in again. And, you know, for the 6th season in a row, we've topped the average attendance figures in Serie A. Inter put out a statement earlier today to say that 1.3 million people have turned up to watch Inter this season. We're in the top 10 for attendance figures in Europe. And this year, we've also moved on to the top 5 for attendance figures in Europe, ahead of Real Madrid.
That's amazing.
Which is you know, really remarkable. Obviously Real Madrid have not had the best season ever, but even so, to be, you know, I'd love someone to send that tweet to whichever Spanish journalist had a go at us and compared us to Chievo last year. I can't remember what his name is, but he works for AS. The guy who mocked us for trying to sign Modric. I hope he's listening to this. And we got a point more than Real Madrid, by the way, in the league this season. So you know, screw him. Who looks like Chievo now, eh? But Inter's fans have to be the Moratti of the week, because you know this team is absolute nonsense. This year it's been more nonsense than ever before. It's been a never-ending sufferance. It's been completely and utterly horrible. I never want to think about this season again. And yet here we all are. We're still here, turning up every week to watch these idiots play football, or at least try to play football. And I just wanted to extend my arms and embrace all of you and congratulate you for not deserting and getting to the end of the season alive, because I think if anyone deserves to be celebrated this week, it must be us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well done, Will. On that note, there's a Napoli supporter, Art Morelli. He's a friend of mine on Twitter, and he said that after the pod last week, he said he tuned in to gloat because Napoli destroyed Inter, but because of how miserable we were, he started feeling bad for us, so that he was rooting for us to actually win this weekend, because he felt no one deserves that kind of crap. So yeah, I think we Inter fans definitely deserve to be the Moggi of the the Moratti of the week, because that we continue putting ourselves through this hell is beyond me, but we do it, and sometimes it's worth it, and most of it isn't, but we do it. And it's going to be. I think that now, you know, after all of this, we've got 3 months of Mercato to look forward to, without the settlement agreement for stopping Inter and the Champions League, and hopefully, you know, and probably a new coach as well. So I think we deserve that kind of energy boost that this gives, because this season has been. I mean, I was exhausted in March. I wanted it to end in March. But then the Icardis decided to go all 50 Shades of Grey on Instagram and everything that happened after that. So no, great one.
It's really been the worst season in years, hasn't it? You know, we've qualified for the Champions League, but it's just been awful.
No, mentally it's been draining.
We are all spent.
I'm spent. I'm absolutely spent.
We couldn't do another pod next week. We're all going to sleep for a month.
No, exactly. I just wanna basically sleep for a month too. Right. That was all we had time for this week, this year, this season. I'd like to thank everyone who's been on the pod, everyone who's listened, especially a special big shout out to James Horncastle for coming on tonight, and also David Garth, the former commercial venue director of Inter. I'd also like to thank you, Will, for commiserating this past year with me here.
It's okay, guys. It's all over. Luca Banti has whistled, and 2018-19 can sod off forever.
Yes.
See you in August.
Yeah, and you also, Alex. Thanks for being here this season.
Despite the chaos, it's been a great time with you guys. Pazza Inter, always and forever.
Yeah, indeed. And thank you, Fulvio, for coming on this season. It's been great to have you on. Hope you'll come also next season. And thank you for sharing the stuff from Italy that I love.
Thank you very much, guys. It was really a pleasure to stay here with you to discuss with you about this. And of course, I will be here next season as well.
Absolutely. Until then, I hope you have an amazing summer. Buona vacanze, and sempre e solo Forza Inter.